It's Black August. Can't nobody tell me not to cuss. Be advised. Hey y'all, I'm Jenn. I'm from Oakland and I'm an androgynous, black, lesbian feminist and a lover of all black people.
This is Daren. I'm an asexual novelist, researcher, and bona fide comic book fanatic from the widest part of Southern California.
Orange County. We're queer millennials with 3 kids and nearly 20 years of marriage.
This is a podcast about the realities of blackness, adulting, and relationships.
This is That Black Couple. Hello. Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Are you? Because you sound congested.
I am a little bit.
Yeah, so we had to take a little break because Daren been dealing with allergies. Daren went to Chicago and came back coughing and hacking and sneezing, and we thought it was COVID, but it's just boogers.
Just good old-fashioned allergies.
Yuck.
Know?
So, we got to do a congested episode.
But now I just have, a deeper.
Oh, my God.
And a sexy.
Please do not do no ASMR.
Radio voice.
I wish I could somehow transmit my facial expression over this podcast. Oh, my God.
It sounds good, though, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound good?
This is episode 4 of season 5 of That Black Couple. Please go grab your water. And in the case of Daren, also get some tea. Get something that's going to help loosen any boogers that you might have. Don't bring no boogers home to your family. Keep the boogers to yourself, unlike some people. Have a seat. This is That Black Couple. I'm Jenn.
I'm Daren.
Before we get started, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at That BLK Couple, on Facebook at That Black Couple, and look us up on the internets at www.thatblackcouple.com.
And you already know, you can find us everywhere. If people stream podcasts there, you can find us there. And that means everywhere. That means Apple Podcasts. That means Spotify. That means Google Podcasts. It means Amazon Music, Audible, Stitcher, Pandora, SoundCloud. Everywhere. And remember, y'all, sign up for that Patreon, because Patreon is where you get the extra stuff. That's where you get the extra sauce on the Patreon.
It was the allergy medication that got you acting weird, I think.
It might be.
I think that's what it is. This is season 5, episode 4, and we're talking about the roots of Black August. We want to understand what Black August is, where it comes from, and why we've talked about it for the last, I think, my lifetime, but at least the last decade or so. I think people have talked about Black August more often. So let's talk about what it is.
Let's do it.
Let's go. All right, so let's start with segment 1, first things first, and let's talk about the radical origins of Black history and Black liberation politics in this country, in the U.S., and also, in other colonized countries. Specifically, let's think about Haiti, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing that has always stood out to me as a Black politics professor, as a political scientist, is how many things I did not fucking know. Like, I just did not know were a thing. So I didn't learn about Juneteenth formally until I was very much into my adulthood. Like, I was very much in my 30s. I had children before I knew exactly what Juneteenth was. Yeah. I had heard people talk about Juneteenth. I had heard about it as an alternative to Independence Day, but no one had explained to me that this was the time when enslaved people, specifically in Texas, had essentially been re-enslaved and kept in slavery for an additional 2 years, and some for shorter periods and some for a little bit longer, because they simply were not given information to let them know that slavery had formally ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. I didn't know any of that information until I was much older.
I didn't really know about it either. And when I think about my childhood, I feel like my mom did a really good job of trying to be like, I'm going to expose you, mm-hmm. I'm going to put you in programs, and you're going to learn about Black history mm-hmm. and all that stuff. But I feel like even then, it was very much what I would call kind of lightweight or like sanitized.
Absolutely.
Like it was very much like, here are all of the inventors. Here's George mm-hmm. Washington Carver.
We made a peanut.
We was doing hair.
I guess we didn't make the peanut.
We didn't make the peanut, but
we made
like,
stuff with the peanut.
Like we was learning stuff, and not to say that stuff isn't important.
But can I tell you, I got Madam C.J. Walkered out. I mean, how many times we got to hear about Madam C.J. Walker? No shade.
Yeah,
I get it.
Good.
Preston Combs and Bergamot. I get it. But it's astounding that we also have all this rich history that never was shared with us because it was all about essentially capitalism.
Well, and yeah, to me, it was about essentializing what people thought Black excellence was.
Correct.
And like you're saying, it was capitalism. It
Correct.
was like, look, you can go out into the workforce and be someone who has something to provide.
And be like the white people.
Who can build, fortunes. You were so right. It was basically to me, it's like the Huxtable model.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can go and you can, assimilate and be successful.
Yeah.
And it's the darkness of that is how much is then just like thrown out that is essential. Right.
And it's interesting. I mean, I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of Black politics history, but, when we think about our scholarship and how there's been folks who were liberationists in the Black radical struggle who were at odds over these types of this type of focus, right? Booker T. Washington was the one who said, cast down your buckets, right? The whole concept of casting down your buckets was to say, hey, Black people, you are able to create the life that you want for yourself. Build, the structure around yourself that you want by participating in this essentially anti-Black white supremacist capitalist system and assimilate. And there were folks like, Du Bois and Garvey and Douglas who were like, yeah, nah, like it's racist, Mm-hmm. And there were many women who unfortunately were mostly watered down and silenced by their male counterparts. But the Sojourner Truths of the world, the Ida B. Wellses of the world, the Anna Julia Coopers of the world, who were like, yeah, like assimilation really not finna get us nowhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Black radical tradition and the ways that certain types of radical politics have been withheld from us. Right. This includes like the Haitian Revolution. I didn't learn about the Haitian Revolution until I was teaching it in a Black politics class in 2011. I was an adult with a master's degree. Mm-hmm. I had 2 children.
And it's funny because my first instinct is to say, oh, this is the history that they're trying to hide from us. This is the history that they want to keep from us. They don't want you to know. And I'm not sure that that's really what it is. Part of me really kind of believes that I think it's more so that people really just don't know.
I think people don't know.
I think generationally people don't know.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think
it
it's all those things simultaneously. I mean, I don't think that there are any colonizers who want us to know about the Haitian Revolution, right? I don't think that there's any way that the Haitian Revolution provides the outcomes that white, especially colonizers, want Black enslaved folks at the time and post-enslaved folks to have. They don't want Black folks to think of themselves and ourselves as collective actors, people who are able to organize and to interrupt the status quo. That's information that is not widely acceptable, mainly because it's seen as a coup. It's seen as undermining a government, even if it's a corrupt and awful government. But also because it instills this idea that it's okay to kind of instate some form of tyranny if you have a faction that has been aggrieved by the government. Yeah. And historically, the only people who feel that that's okay are white people. That's why we talk about the Boston Tea Party as if it's some huge liberatory moment, when in actuality it was a bunch of white people fighting with white people over goods that didn't belong to either one of them. Mm-hmm. It's odd.
And that's why it is so important that we do center these types of celebrations, these types of momentous moments in history. It is important that we highlight Black liberation movements and radical movements so that people know that they exist.
Right.
I talked about the Huxtable model because it's a model of possibility.
Right.
But this is the same thing. It's the model of possibility to say radicalism is something that's possible.
Right.
It's something that has existed.
Right.
It's something that has brought about radical change in the world. And, as you're saying, colonizers don't want you to know that.
No, they don't.
Right.
And
it's not in their best interest.
It's not. And it's we should also be talking about the Black folks who participate in this, mm-hmm. right? The Black folks for whom the Haitian Revolution is a step too far, right? The black folks for whom, talking about Juneteenth is something that they also didn't do because they actually want to celebrate Independence Day, right? Like I think, and this is not to begrudge them, but this is also to say that waters down our history too. That changes what children know. That's part of the reason why so many of us are not socialized to know our own history, because we also participate in this.
Right.
This podcast is supported by generous donations from our patrons and listeners. Become a supporter today by heading to www.patreon.com/colorcombosmedia.
You can stream the show on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. When you listen, please consider hitting that heart button, sharing, giving us a 5-star rating, and leaving some dope comments. This helps us with our page rankings and gets more listeners for the show. Thank you so much.
And we're back.
And we are back. You ready?
It's time for the conversation.
This is my favorite part. This is your favorite part. Let's get to it.
Let's conversate.
Okay.
So we're talking about Black August.
Black August.
And as usual, I like to educate the people.
I know. Here you go.
I know you're the professor, but I like to educate the people.
And according to the people on the street, you got a PhD too. So
I do.
Yeah. When you with a PhD for this long, I think you get some type of like proxy PhD.
Yeah, when you read the papers and when you're the sounding board,
you be in the classes. You've been in classes with me since 2002.
Yeah. When you be helping to pull citations for papers, you definitely get.
You've been in presentations. You done hooked up so many electronics, so many cameras. You done so much lighting. You a PhD.
I earned that.
You've earned it.
I need someone to print me one.
Now I don't want no PhD listening to this to get mad. I'm joking. Okay, please relax.
I know y'all sensitive about your shit.
Please relax. It's a podcast. Jesus.
Let's talk about Black August.
Okay.
All right. So, I realized going into this episode that there's likely a lot of people that don't know what Black August is.
Correct.
Right. Which again is the point.
Yes.
Of Black August and of shows like this so that people can learn.
Yes.
So Black August was birthed as a reaction to the killing of Black Panther George Jackson in August of 1971 during an uprising at the San Quentin State Prison in California. Now, this is definitely an interesting story.
Yes.
It's definitely something we should know about. I definitely recommend people doing their own research, following up on this, learning about him, learning about the uprising, learning about what was happening. Just as a side note, so people understand the type of mess that was going on, is he was sentenced to a term of 1 to life.
I don't even know what that is.
1 to life basically means you could be here for 1 year, you could be here for the rest of your life.
Wow.
It was basically up to the prison system to decide how long he was going to be in there. Right.
The 70s were wild, bro.
Which is a wild sentence.
Listen, they hated the Black Panthers. Let me tell you something right now. Let's talk about it.
That is. Can you imagine someone sentencing you from 1 to life?
Listen, the Black Panthers and the Black Power movement are still seen as some of the most radical moments in U.S. history in terms of movement and power politics. And unfortunately, the U.S., the institutions, the FBI, the CIA, probably not the CIA. Actually, the CIA was involved. These institutions that govern us, the FBI, the CIA, local state actors, SWAT teams, right? They were all coordinating together to eradicate the Black Panthers, to eradicate the Black Power moment and the movement, and to kill these people, right? Like, we know what happened to Fred Hampton. We all have now seen a movie about Fred Hampton. This was not rare. This was normal. So hearing this about George Jackson should not be a surprise, given that in this moment between the 60s and the 90s, there was a concerted effort by the U.S. government to kill, to eradicate, to extradite, to remove anybody associated with this movement.
Yep, because it was a threat.
Yes.
They just didn't like it.
Yes.
They didn't like the ideals. They didn't like what they were doing, right? It was a threat to the system.
I mean, Black people were arming themselves and saying we should actually end the police and we should do it by force. That
shall not stand.
Not an anti-Black white supremacist country that's rooted in a history of enslavement. No,
it's not gonna work.
No.
But yes, that is kind of what the genesis was, right?
Yes.
Is he was a freedom fighter and he worked in the liberatory movement, and honestly, the celebration itself started in August of 1979 to honor his fight to honor the work that he was doing. And it was started by the inmates of the San Quentin prison, right? Which is an amazing, movement to even just think about. To
Absolutely.
say that the inmates said, we want to honor our brother in arms who was in here with us. And
San Quentin has a
did.
rich history, unfortunately, as a prison in the U.S.
He was doing a lot of work from the prison. He was writing books from the prison.
Absolutely.
Right? It wasn't like he was locked up and that was the end. He's still working, right? And people wanted to honor that. And so his fellow inmates honored that. That was the genesis of Black August. But now it's been kind of expanded and transformed a little bit to where it's now really like a wider celebration of Black freedom fighters in general, the commemoration of the fight for Black liberation, and an awareness campaign also for Black political prisoners, right? Because these, the fight goes on.
Yes.
We're still fighting it. People are still on the streets. Terrible things are still being done to the people, right? And people are still on the front lines. People are still losing their lives, right? And it's almost been kind of fashioned as like an alternate Black History Month to say, let's say Black History Month. Yeah, woo, woo, woo. Like you said, Madam C.J. Walker. Yeah. But Black August is to say, yeah, but also.
Yes. And I think what we should also make sure that we understand is like George Jackson, to be clear here, he wasn't a single actor, right? This was a movement leader and a movement politician, right? George Jackson was affiliated with someone who, and I know personally, is Angela Davis, right? And she's a communist. She has deep beliefs not only in the ways that we think about race and gender and abolition, but also specifically how they're rooted in this capitalist society. And George Jackson was motivated to do this work by Vietnamese nationalists like Ho Chi Minh, Korean nationalists, Chinese communists and nationalists. So his work, even from that prison, was not even just rooted in a Black power or a Black tradition. It was rooted in this idea that people should be free no matter where they are. And that's why he was so unpopular. That's why he was so targeted in the U.S., because he was essentially modeling a Black liberation moment and movement after a lot of successful movements that had happened across the world for, dually and triply marginalized groups. It's really important, I think, when we understand and think about abolition, to understand that abolition is not just about closing down prisons and getting rid of police, right? Abolition is also thinking about ways to eradicate the ideas that support prisons and support police, right? People who think it's okay for us to have boxes that we put people in. And George Jackson's experience is really important to this, because he was not only incarcerated, right, for essentially being a liberationist. He was treated so awfully in prison that's what motivated prisoners there and incarcerated folks there to later commemorate him and to establish this idea of Black August, right? He was, whenever they wanted to punish him, prison guards would essentially put him in unfair confinement. They would put him in isolation, which we know has debilitating effects on the human mind and the body. They would also use the prison system to deny his rights. So every time he would try and seek any type of probation or any type of rights to allow him to actually just be a human with his community, they denied it. So they essentially took the opportunity, once he was imprisoned, to completely isolate him from the world. And what we know is that these prisons, these institutions, are made not to rehabilitate. They're not made to address the crime or the perceived crime, right? They are made to tear people down to nothing, so that they can no longer be a part of society. And that's precisely what they did to George Jackson. And he actually died at the hands of prison guards during an escape. He was only 29 years old. 29. So I just want to make it clear, like, we're talking about young people here. We're talking about, when we talk about abolitionists and freedom fighters who were killed in the 70s and 80s, these were 20 and maybe 30-year-olds, but mostly, and sometimes teens, right?
Yeah.
Like Bobby Seale, like, these were young people. These are all young people. Fred Hampton was in his 20s. These are young people. So to be clear, abolition and Black August are deeply connected, not just because we want to see the end of prisons and police, but because we deeply understand that blackness is what's criminalized in the U.S. Blackness is the thing that people and institutions seek to annihilate and to get rid of. Abolition is helping us to recover ourselves. It's not just about ending the prisons and the police. It's about Black people being able to be human.
Right, and that's the thing about this story that really kind of speaks to me, because I know there's people that hear about this. I know there's people probably listening right now that are like, he died during a prison escape attempt. Oh, well, he shouldn't have been trying to escape prison, right? You know, part of Black radicalism is pushing against the system, right? People say, oh, you got to work within the system. The system is what it is. You know, that's just the reality, right? But we just talked about his experience, right? We just talked about his sentence of 1 to life. We just talked about the confinement. We just talked about the treatment, right? The pure weaponization of the prison industrial complex against him, right?
Absolutely.
And in seeking justice and in seeking fairness and in seeking, you know, just life, right? What we do in Black August is we honor those people that had the courage to push against the system, that had the courage to say, this is an unjust system. And because it's an unjust system, I shouldn't have to be held in prison. I am a political prisoner, right? That is what these situations are. And these type of actions, especially, you know, like we're talking about the actions of the Black Panthers, right?
Yeah.
They may be extreme, but they also shine a light on the extremity that's happening
right
against them.
You got to be extreme when the systems against you are extreme.
Right. It's kind of like there's no choice.
Right. When the system is trying to kill you, what do? You fight back. And you fight back with the stakes being death.
We've talked about this before, but I feel like this is one of those things where as time goes on, we're changing and we're getting more radical and we're doing things differently. And we just talked about how, you know, we learned about Black history as kids, but we didn't learn about this stuff. But I feel like now more and more people are teaching their kids these things.
Absolutely.
They're getting exposed to these ideas earlier.
Absolutely.
And that does, again, open up a different possibility model for younger people to look at the world and say, how should it be? And for them to be able to mold it into what they intend.
Yeah, I want to tack on the Haitian Revolution here because I feel like that was something that I knew nothing about. I actually had a student tell me about it when I was teaching a class one time. And I was like, I should know this. Like, I didn't know who Toussaint Louverture was, right?
Well, and that's the other thing. On August 23rd was the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its Abolition.
Right.
And it was chosen for that day because of the Haitian Revolution.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead and kind of give the background.
Right. So the Haitian Revolution began on the night of the 22nd and went into the 23rd in August in 1791. What people should know about the Haitian Revolution is that it started because there were so many factions in Haiti who were enslaved. And you have to always remember these are not enslaved people from the same countries and not from the same tribes. And so when folks were coming through Haiti, coming through the Caribbean and making stops there and then moving into the U.S., there were a lot of decisions being made about who would stay where and who would end up in the continental United States of America. And so for most of that period in the late 18th century, there was this kind of transitory, kind of migratory relationship between Haiti and these kind of mainland populations. But the French were brutal, right? The French were brutal in Haiti, and their main focus was just on crops, right? All they wanted was sugar. All they wanted was the land to be tilled. And so they kind of saw enslaved people as very much fungible, expendable. They saw them as replaceable. And so this was in the Caribbean, enslavement was really, really dangerous because it's mostly swampland that they were tilling. And so when they would till this soil and they would take care of these crops, a lot of them would get infections, they would get sick, they would die. And the enslavers didn't care at all. They just didn't care. And so this idea of kind of lost cargo in the Caribbean was like a known thing. Like they saw chattel slaves, this property, as very much something that they could be without as long as they got the goods. As long as they got the goods, that's what they cared about. And the demand was so high in the U.S. for these goods in the Caribbean that the outlay wasn't that bad, right? Losing enslaved people, having enslaved people die, it didn't matter to them because they were making so much money and so much cash selling goods to U.S. populations. So this is when we talk about the slave trade, right? That's what we're talking about. The ways that you're not just transporting people, right? But that you also now, in the transport of people, you're extracting labor. And now the goods that those people help you to procure, that becomes a part of the slave trade as well, right? So in Haiti, the uprising happened because young black folk, right, were sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they had done this really elaborate racialization system, this colorism system, where they were calling people quadroons and thinking about, and this is again, you can do your own research, but they were figuring out ways to quantify folks' closeness to whiteness and closeness to blackness to justify certain types of enslavement and certain types of labor. And so when Haiti began warring with the French, these factions became very, very contentious because there were mulattoes, right? There were people who were the result of enslaved women being raped systematically by their slave owners, who felt some affinity toward white folk, who felt some affinity toward colonizers. And so in choosing sides, there were often the light skins who was choosing the side of the French against their Haitian indigenous born Afro diasporic comrades. So Toussaint Louverture is known for being one of the greatest leaders of this revolution and organizing all these different factions, all these different people from different tribes, from different countries, some who were naturalized in Haiti itself, some who came from other Caribbean countries in the surrounding areas, and essentially overthrowing French rule in Haiti. Right. And there's lots of, conversation about whether that was really successful because Haiti continues to struggle to this day. There's still a lot of political issues there, a lot of poverty. But they've got their freedom from the colonizers and they had it first. Yep. So that's the roots. And it shocked me that I didn't know that. There's whole books written about this, and I couldn't find them until I was in my mid 30s.
And it goes along with what we've been saying. but that also, to me, as we talk about Black August, right, that's why it's important to spotlight these things. That's why it's important to share that, right? It's important to know that especially in a time where Florida and Governor Ron DeSantis are trying to cast slavery as a learning opportunity,
trade school,
right? Like it's important to highlight that this was happening.
Absolutely.
That slaves were rising up and organizing themselves.
Absolutely, all over the world.
Right. It's important to note that, because if you leave it up to some people, we'll see what the history books will say.
Kanye thinks that slaves enjoyed it.
Child.
That's why we need books, and we need history,
and we got to read them.
And we got to read them.
We got to read them, and we got to share them.
We got to talk about it.
You can find my mom and dad, aka That Black Couple, on the web at thatblackcouple.com. That Black Couple is owned and operated by Color Combos Media. If you would like to help fund our content, sign up at www.patreon.com/colorcombosmedia. Please consider giving us $5 or $10 per month to help us build our platform and grow our organization. You can also give one-time donations at www.paypal.me/colorcombosmedia. All donations are welcome.
And we're back. Wow, it feels like it's been an eternity, but it's only one more segment.
I know.
Wow. So let's wrap it up. We're gonna do our little reflection and talk about Black August and the Haitian Revolution, Abolition, and understanding what this means for our actual lives. Do you want to start?
I would love to start.
Go ahead.
Because I want to talk about one of my favorite things on this green earth.
Yes.
And it's my children.
Our children.
Our children.
We made them together.
It was
mostly me.
Just the two of us.
It was mostly me.
I labored
It was mostly me.
Tirelessly.
It was mostly me.
10 months.
That's why I don't even look like you. That's what you get.
They tell you it's 9, but
That's
it's
what
10
you
months.
get. Shut up. They tell you it's 9, but it's 10 months. You get on my nerve.
It was a lot of work.
You get on my nerve.
But thank God they are here.
It was mostly me.
They made it.
It was actually almost all me. Me. I did it 3 times. I don't know why I would do that to myself.
But look what has been unleashed upon this earth.
Yeah, they're incredible.
3 balls of brilliance. 1, 2, 3 balls of brilliance.
I don't know about the saying. I agree that they're brilliant, but I don't know about balls of brilliance.
I mean, they're like.
I would have gone with barrels, bodies, bodegas, but I don't know about balls of brilliance. Balls of brilliance sounds like something else.
Yeah,
It sounds like you want to talk about something else, but it's okay. I know what you was going for.
Yeah, you get it.
Yes, our children are incredible. We have 3 children. They're 9, 11, and 15.
Yeah, and what I wanted to talk about in relation to them is just what we were talking about in the conversation about how important it is to teach your kids and to let them know about Blackness and all of its facets and all of those things.
Absolutely.
And these kids, they continue to amaze me because, for those of y'all listening that are not parents, like, your kids are a constant mirror and reflection of you.
Absolutely.
But they are also this amazing window into your own past.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly looking at your kids and remembering what you were like when they were their age.
Yeah.
And the things that they say back to me,
yeah.
the things that they are aware of, their stances on society and institutions, their mastery of Black history,
gender and sexuality.
It is something that
it's incredible.
I am thrown on a daily basis.
It's very impressive.
The things that they say, and not even just that they say them, but they say them like normal conversation.
Right, with confidence.
Like this is something everyone
This is just
gets.
a fact. It's just a fact that gender is not on a binary. You don't know someone's gender until you talk to them. It's just known. Trans women are women, and they just know it.
Yeah, and they're like, well, obviously. Like if we ask them, because as a parent, you got to check up.
Absolutely.
You say, oh, so hey, child, are trans women? And they're like,
duh.
Yeah.
Or you're like, hey, do you understand the history of Thanksgiving? They're like, I'm not celebrating that. And you're like, whoa. Okay, 7-year-old. All right.
When I was that age, I was like, yes, bring me the ham.
I had no idea. I'm not gonna lie. At 7 years old, I was like into that whole cornucopia thing with it was cute. Grapes falling out and corn hanging out with the corn of the different colors. I was coloring the corn in. I was doing all type of stuff. I had no idea. No one had taught me about indigenous history as related to Thanksgiving. I had not learned any of that. Mm-hmm. I was still learning this idea of the happy indigenous people helped colonizers and they gave them food and it was one big dinner. I
think the one thing that I did learn was like, oh, they brought disease with them, but it was cast in a light of like, oh, they were just white people and they didn't know.
I learned that much later. I learned that in high school. They didn't teach me that in grade school or middle school, and they intentionally wait to teach you that until you're less impressionable. They intentionally wait until you're older and you've already developed your belief systems and you already have your ideas and what is true, and then they're like, oh, it was intentionally to put smallpox in blankets and then to give it to indigenous people.
And that's why, this is a little bit off topic, but that's why, all of this CRT stuff, all of these things about like taking gay out of schools, is so evil, because it's that exact thing. They're saying, oh, they're kids. We shouldn't. No, you need to expose that to them now.
So this dovetails with what I wanted to reflect on, right? So our kids are wonderful. I think it's really great that they are in a moment where they know this stuff. It's accessible. It's on the internet. They can just watch a YouTube video or a TikTok and it tells them all about the history of these awful atrocities in the U.S. in digestible ways. I'm a professor, and it's astounding to be teaching young people like that, right? Because I have to say this in my classes all the time. I never took a gender class before I began teaching about gender.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to sit with that. Like I never took a class in Black feminist politics or gender in politics or gender in society. I never physically have enrolled in any of those classes because they weren't available to me. Mm-hmm. And so the conversation you're having about CRT and the attacks on critical race theory and the attacks on everything that has to do with all the people who are considered other, right? Non-white, the queers, the people who are outside the gender binaries or who are read in such a way, the middle class and below, poor working class folk, indigenous folk, trans folk, immigrant folk, queer folk, disabled folk, like it's really strange to be teaching about these things, having never been formally trained myself, but be teaching people who can just Google it and come to these classrooms with so much wisdom and so much more socialization and experience with these things than I do.
Yep.
Right? Like I had to go out and scrounge and explore and dig to learn about my own history. Right? And now I'm teaching these Gen A folks for whom they're like, yeah, so I'm past that. I'm on theorizing now. You know what I'm saying? And I've been teaching now for since 2011. So 12 years now?
Yeah.
And so I've watched this kind of evolution where I'm seeing, I was teaching millennials back then. I'm now seeing these young people and they're just so different. They're just so different. And I think that's what I'm reflecting on, is that I think it's important that we keep talking about this stuff because now there's a new concerted effort, right? But there's a contingent of young people who are post-millennial or late millennial.
They know better.
They already got it, right? And that makes me feel good. They've already got it. There's a new batch right now who are at risk, right? These new Gen A'ers, these really, really young people who are still in grade school, who are in their 4s and 5s, who are being born right now. Those are the ones who I think are really at risk because that's what conservatives want. They want to erase this history before folks are able to even read or know who they are.
That's their best weapon.
That's their best weapon. But we already covered it. We already fucked a lot of shit up. Like the millennials fucked a lot of shit up. So I don't think that they're actually going to be as successful as they think they are.
I don't think they are either.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, you see it. You see it in people walking around. You see it in these children and how they operate. You see it on TikTok. The normalization of so many of these things, and also the access to information. Obviously, that's also why there's this proliferation of misinformation.
Absolutely.
Because it's so easy to have access to things now. Like we talk to our kids about this all the time. It's like when we did book reports and when we had to research things, we went up to the bookcase and we pulled out that Encyclopedia Britannica.
Sure did.
And we flipped through pages and we looked at indices and we read that tiny print. Like that was how we got our information. That was it. Like I remember when the internet was new. Yeah. And I'm not that old.
I remember when the internet dropped.
But I remember when I was like, oh shit.
It was like Beyonce.
I can type in a phone number and my computer will go connect to some things.
Legit. Boom, boom, little Running Man.
Like we remember that.
We remember that.
And to see, we had kids very young, obviously, but it's interesting to see, like, within one generation, how quickly things have turned around and changed, and how quickly people are adapting and using that in good ways. Yeah, and while the conservatives will try to tamp down on formal education because that's where their power is, they'll never be able to water down stuff like this, right? Mm-hmm. They'll never be able to take away podcasts and other forms of free speech, right? That's why they're trying to get rid of things like TikTok, and they're trying to change Twitter, right? They're trying to change social media so that you can't have free speech on those platforms because Black Twitter got to be too much, right? Black Twitter got to be too much. We got to be too powerful. But we always find places. We always find spaces. We make spaces for ourselves. So I'm not actually concerned about whether or not this knowledge will be passed down and transferred, but I am concerned that there will be whole communities of people who've been affected by the lack of formal education, and that does change beliefs. It does shape things like how people vote, how people engage with the political system, how they think about their own political efficacy, whether or not they can influence that system. Right? It affects those kinds of things, and that's what they're doing successfully, and that's what we have to fight. And that's what Black August is about, y'all. Absolutely. Continuing that fight. Yeah. Thank y'all for listening. Before you go, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ThatBLKCouple, on Facebook at ThatBlackCouple, and look us up on the internets at www.thatblackcouple.com. Bye.